The day the anonymous note was taped to their front door, Hudson knew their peaceful life in the Seattle suburb was about to change forever. "Keep your disgusting lifestyle away from our kids," it read in crude handwriting. And as he stood there frozen with Elijah by his side, the weight of years of hidden glances from neighbors suddenly felt like a storm about to break. Hudson crumpled the paper in his fist, the crisp morning air suddenly too cold for a late spring day in Maple Grove. Elijah, still in his robe, reached out and touched his shoulder, steady as always. "It's just some coward," he said quietly, but his voice carried the same tremor Hudson felt in his own chest. They had moved here 3 years ago for the quiet streets, the good schools, and the promise of a normal life together. Two men in their late 20s building something real. Hudson worked as a graphic designer from their sunny home office, while Elijah taught history at the local high school. Their weekends were filled with farmers market runs, backyard barbecues for close friends, and long walks along the greenbelt where they could hold hands without thinking twice. That morning they tried to shake it off. Hudson made coffee the way Elijah liked it, strong with just a splash of oat milk, while Elijah read the note again over his shoulder. "We've waved at these people for years," Hudson said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. "Mrs. Thompson even brought us cookies when we first moved in." Elijah nodded, but his eyes lingered on the window where the cul-de-sac stretched out in perfect suburban symmetry. By afternoon, the note was forgotten in the trash, replaced by the familiar rhythm of their day. Hudson sketched logos for a new client, while Elijah graded papers at the kitchen table, soft jazz playing from the speaker. When the sun dipped low, they cooked stir-fry together, bumping hips at the stove like they always did, stealing quick kisses that tasted of ginger and garlic. Yet the next morning brought another note. This one slipped under the windshield wiper of Elijah's car. "We don't want your kind teaching our children." Elijah found it before school and stood in the driveway longer than usual, shoulders tight. Hudson watched from the porch, heart pounding. They decided to ignore it again. Talking about it only made it real, but the silence between them stretched a little tighter. At work, Elijah smiled through staff meetings, but Hudson could picture the way his husband's fingers would tap the steering wheel on the drive home. By the weekend, the stares started. Mrs. Thompson across the street suddenly remembered an urgent errand whenever they stepped outside. The dad 3 houses down stopped waving when he walked his dog past their yard. Hudson tried to laugh it off with their best friend Alex during a Friday night beer on the back deck. "Small-town minds," Alex said, clinking bottles. "You two are the best thing that ever happened to this block." But even Alex's optimism felt fragile when Hudson noticed the way the man's eyes flicked toward the street, checking who might be watching. Elijah's mother called that Sunday, her voice bright on speakerphone as always. "How's my favorite son-in-law?" she asked Hudson first, then launched into questions about Elijah's job. She never said the words gay or husband, but the careful way she danced around their life had always stung. Elijah changed the subject to the weather, and Hudson slipped away to the kitchen, pretending to refill his glass. Later that night, lying in bed with Elijah's head on his chest, Hudson whispered, "We're not doing anything wrong." Elijah's answer was a soft kiss to his collarbone. "I know, but sometimes knowing isn't enough." The following week brought rain and the first real vandalism. Someone keyed a thin line across Elijah's car door. Nothing flashy, just enough to notice. Hudson found it when he went out for the mail, and the sight sent a cold spike through him. They filed a report at the police station, where the officer nodded sympathetically but warned them these things were hard to prove. On the drive home, Elijah stared out the window at the dripping trees. "Maybe we should just repaint it and move on," he said. Hudson gripped the wheel tighter. "And let them win." Elijah didn't answer. That evening they sat on the couch watching an old movie, but neither really saw the screen. Hudson kept replaying every friendly wave they'd ever given, every block party smile, wondering which neighbor now hated them enough to pick up a key. Elijah finally spoke into the dark. "I keep thinking about my students. What if one of them hears something?" Hudson pulled him closer, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo. "Then we show them what real courage looks like." The words felt brave in the moment, but as the credits rolled and the house grew quiet, Hudson lay awake wondering how much courage the neighborhood would let them have. The harassment didn't stop with the car. By mid-May, trash bags appeared on their lawn every Thursday night, someone timing it perfectly after pickup day. Hudson hauled the mess to the curb before Elijah could see it, but the smell lingered like an accusation. At the neighborhood association meeting that month, they arrived early, hoping to blend in. Instead, conversation died when they entered the community center. Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat and suggested a new rule about appropriate yard displays, her eyes darting to the rainbow flag Hudson had hung for Pride Month. Elijah kept his face neutral, but Hudson felt the heat rise in his cheeks. After the meeting, Alex pulled them aside in the parking lot. "People are talking," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Some parents at the school are asking if Elijah's influence is appropriate." Elijah laughed bitterly. "Influence? I teach the Louisiana Purchase, not how to be gay." Hudson squeezed his hand, but the drive home was silent. That night Elijah stayed up late grading papers he'd already finished, and Hudson pretended to sleep. The misunderstanding came 2 days later. Hudson had confronted the teenager who lived next door after catching him loitering near their mailbox. Words were exchanged, nothing violent, but loud enough for Elijah to hear from the kitchen. When Hudson came inside, Elijah stood with arms crossed. "You didn't have to yell at a kid, Hud. What if his parents file a complaint?" Hudson stared, stunned. "He was the one leaving the notes. I saw him." Elijah shook his head. "You don't know that. You're letting this turn you into someone I don't recognize." The argument ended with Elijah sleeping on the couch, the first time in 3 years. Hudson lay in their empty bed replaying every word, wondering when standing up for them had become the problem. To clear his head, Hudson drove to the coffee shop where they'd first met. The barista still remembered their order: 2 oat milk lattes, extra foam. Sitting at the same corner table, he pulled out his sketchbook and drew the old version of them. Younger, laughing, no notes on doors. Elijah had been grading midterms that day. Hudson had spilled his drink reaching for a napkin. Their first conversation had lasted 2 hours. Now, 3 years later, Hudson wondered if that easy laughter was gone forever. Elijah's older brother Ryan visited unannounced the following weekend. He'd driven up from Portland just to check on things, but his awkward hugs and careful avoidance of the guest room told another story. Over dinner, Ryan asked too many questions about Elijah's job security and too few about their life together. When Ryan left Sunday night, Elijah stood at the window long after the taillights disappeared. "He still thinks I'll wake up one day and choose differently," he said softly. Hudson wrapped arms around him from behind. "Then he doesn't know you at all." But the words felt hollow against the growing distance between them. Alex tried to help by throwing an impromptu barbecue. A dozen friends showed up, laughter filling the backyard, but Hudson noticed how many neighbors peeked over fences and then quickly looked away. One friend pulled Elijah aside and whispered something that made his face tighten. Later, when the last guest left, Elijah admitted, "She asked if we'd considered moving, for our safety." Hudson felt the betrayal like a slap. Alex had sworn the gathering would show the neighborhood they were just normal guys. Instead, it had highlighted how alone they really were. That night they lay side by side without touching. Hudson whispered, "I'm sorry I yelled at the kid." Elijah turned, eyes glistening in the dark. "I'm sorry I doubted you." They fell asleep holding hands, but the peace lasted only until morning when another note appeared. This one in their mailbox, printed neatly. "Your kind isn't welcome here." June brought heat and the first real fracture in their circle. Alex called one afternoon sounding nervous. "Look, I was at the gym and some guys from the block were talking. They asked me if I knew about your situation before I became friends with you." Hudson's stomach dropped. "What did you say?" Alex hesitated. "I told them the truth. You're good people." "But Hud, they're organizing something. A petition or whatever." Elijah overheard and went very still. The friendship that had felt like armor now seemed paper thin. The next morning, Elijah's school principal asked for a private meeting. Nothing official, just a few parent concerns. Elijah came home pale, loosening his tie like it was choking him. They didn't say gay, but they didn't have to. Hudson wanted to storm the school, but Elijah stopped him. "That's exactly what they want. Make me look unstable." Instead, they spent the evening researching lawyers, the clinical language of discrimination cases feeling foreign on their tongues. Hudson's own family offered little comfort. His mother in Chicago sent a long email full of Bible verses she'd never quoted before. "We love you, honey, but maybe tone it down for the neighbors. He read it aloud to Elijah, voice cracking on the last line. Elijah listened without comment, then pulled Hudson into a hug that lasted until the sun went down. In that quiet moment, Hudson realized how much he had leaned on Elijah's steadiness. Now he needed to be the strong one. A small bright spot arrived when their neighbor, Mr. Patel from 2 doors down, brought over a plate of samosas. "My wife and I don't agree with what's happening," he said quietly. "You boys have always been polite." It was the first open support, and they clung to it like a lifeline. But that night another bag of trash landed on the lawn. Someone had waited until the Patels' lights went out. The psychological toll showed in small ways. Elijah started double-checking the locks 3 times before bed. Hudson found himself scanning every passing car for familiar faces. Their once easy conversations turned careful, as if words themselves could be weaponized. During a rare date night at their favorite Italian place downtown, Elijah suddenly asked, "Do you ever wish we'd stayed in the city where nobody cared?" Hudson set down his fork. "Every single day. But I also love the life we built here, until they try to take it." The major turning point came without warning. Elijah received a certified letter from the school board requesting a voluntary meeting about his contract renewal. The timing, right after the petition rumors, felt deliberate. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope for a full minute before speaking. "If I lose my job, we lose the house." Hudson knelt beside him. "Then we fight. Together." For the first time in weeks, Elijah's smile reached his eyes. That night, they made a pact. No more hiding, no more apologizing for who they were. The school board meeting was scheduled for the last Thursday in June. Hudson took the day off to attend, sitting in the back row while Elijah stood at the podium in his best suit. Parents filled the room, some clutching printed copies of the petition. When the floor opened for comments, Mrs. Thompson stood first. "We just want our children protected from agendas," she said, voice sweet as poison. The room murmured agreement. Elijah's hands trembled slightly as he replied, "My agenda is teaching history accurately. My personal life has never entered my classroom." Hudson's heart swelled with pride, even as fear clawed at his throat. After the meeting, they walked to the parking lot in silence. Elijah's contract was renewed. Barely, but the damage was done. Word spread fast. The next morning, their mailbox was smashed, shards of plastic scattered like confetti from a nightmare. Hudson swept it up while Elijah called the police again. The officer who arrived sighed. "We'll file the report," but they knew the rest. Betrayal arrived in the form of a text from Alex. "Dude, I tried to defend you at the gym, but things got heated. Someone recorded me and posted it online saying I'm part of the problem." Attached was a blurry video clip. Elijah watched it once and handed the phone back without a word. Hudson felt the crack widen between them and their last close friend. In the middle of the storm, Elijah's mother flew in for an unannounced visit. She hugged them both tightly at the airport, then spent 3 days tiptoeing around the truth. On the final evening, she sat them down. "I've been praying about this," she began. Elijah cut her off gently. "Mom, we're not broken. We're just tired." Something in his voice finally reached her. She cried, apologized for years of careful distance, and promised to talk to Ryan. It wasn't perfect, but it was the first time she'd truly seen them. That small victory gave them strength. Hudson started documenting every incident: photos, timestamps, witness statements. Elijah reached out to the local LGBTQ+ center for advice. Slowly, their living room table became a war room of evidence and quiet determination. One night, after another trash incident, they sat on the porch steps sharing a single beer. "Remember when we thought buying this house was the hardest thing we'd ever do?" Elijah asked. Hudson leaned against him. "Yeah. Now I'd give anything to go back to just arguing about paint colors." July 4th brought fireworks and a breaking point. The neighborhood held its annual block party in the cul-de-sac. Hudson and Elijah debated skipping it, but decided showing up together was the strongest statement they could make. They arrived with a tray of deviled eggs and matching American flag shirts, smiles fixed like armor. At first, people avoided them. Then Mr. Patel waved them over to his grill. A few others followed, tentative hellos, awkward small talk. Mrs. Thompson kept her distance, but the tension felt different, thinner somehow. The climax came when a group of teenagers set off illegal fireworks too close to their house. One rocket veered and landed on their roof, sparking a small fire. Neighbors rushed over with hoses before the fire department arrived. In the chaos, Hudson heard Mrs. Thompson shout, "Get them out of there!" But another voice, Mr. Patel's, answered louder. "There are neighbors too." For the first time, the street seemed split, not against them, but around them. While firefighters contained the blaze, Elijah stood on the lawn covered in soot, watching the crowd. A teenage boy, Mrs. Thompson's grandson, stepped forward hesitantly. "I'm gay too," he whispered, so quietly only Elijah heard. The boy's eyes were wide with fear and relief. Elijah put a hand on his shoulder, and something shifted in the air. By the time the trucks left, a dozen neighbors had gathered on their driveway offering help with cleanup. Mrs. Thompson stood on her porch alone, watching. That night, exhausted and smelling of smoke, Hudson and Elijah sat on the back steps again. "I think we just witnessed a miracle," Hudson said. Elijah laughed softly. "Or maybe just people remembering how to be human." The fire had destroyed part of their roof, but it had also burned away the last wall of silence. The weeks that followed felt like a different neighborhood. Mr. Patel organized a repair crew. Neighbors showed up with tools and ladders, turning the roof damage into a community project. Mrs. Thompson stayed inside at first, but one afternoon she appeared on their doorstep with a fresh batch of cookies. "I was wrong," she said simply. "My grandson, he told me everything." Elijah invited her in for coffee, and they talked for 2 hours. She left with tears in her eyes and a promise to speak at the next association meeting. Word spread. More families reached out, some with quiet apologies, others with casseroles and offers to watch the house while they took a weekend away. Alex showed up one evening, hat in hand. "I should have done better," he admitted. They forgave him over pizza on the porch, the easy laughter finally returning. Elijah's mother called weekly now, asking real questions about their life. Even Ryan sent a text. "Proud of you both." By late August, the street threw them a surprise welcome home party after their short trip to the coast. Banners hung between trees, and the entire block turned out. Hudson stood on their front lawn holding Elijah's hand, watching children run through sprinklers and adults clink glasses. The rainbow flag still flew from their porch, brighter than ever. They had lost nothing that truly mattered and gained everything they never knew they needed. The journey had been brutal, misunderstandings that nearly broke them, secrets that almost cost them everything, betrayals that tested every bond. But every scar had led here, to a community that finally saw them. Can one act of courage from a single neighbor truly change an entire community's heart? True or false?